So just to hand it off to our first panel, I want to just do a little bit of scene setting. So our remit here in the Impact Data Science team at Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth is to think about building the field of data for social impact and what that means, who the partners are, what the use cases and stakeholders are. And so this first panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Stewart from data.org, and we're going to be hearing about the state of the field as it is and how we include inclusive AI in that field, from Iqbal with JPAL, Katya from the UN, with Gayan from UNDP, also the UN, and Lauren from DataKind. So give them a hand. Welcome.
So in preparing for this session, I think it was Lauren that asked me, what would Shamina say? I said, last year was actionable impact. I think she's going to build on that. So this panel is going to now try to build on that. As she's laid out, we have to make AI work for everyone. What are the practical use cases? What does coordination look like? Right? And what are the challenges? Thankfully, those are not things I can answer. We have a fantastic panel here. So let's jump right into it, right? As pioneers of inclusive AI, who are leading organizations expanding the field of impact data and AI, what does data for social impact or inclusive AI mean to you? I'm going to personalize this. Lauren, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad everybody is here, because I think this conversation around what does inclusive AI really means is sort of the critical one. Someone asked me earlier this morning, what have you felt like this week? And I said, well, I think some of the unbridled optimism that we felt maybe in the last couple of years of AI is going to change the world, pardon me, or, oh my gosh, AI is going to destroy everything that we've ever known, somewhere in between those things, is actually kind of moderated to a much more realistic view of how do we move forward and how do we actually make sure that these tools are in the hands of social impact organizations and being used for good. And I love the fact that we've started to expand that definition of inclusive. And we've talked a lot about ethical AI and how we use AI well, but we've started to really dig into some of the questions around what is the underlying data and how do we get to equity issues? And we know that the underlying data isn't equitable, so how do we start to fix that? And what's the call to action around that? And we've started to see really great use cases around AI having some real impact. And so we've done some work that was started here at Mastercard with John Jay College and reducing college dropouts. Google's picked that work up, and now we're scaling that across the country. That's going to be great because John Jay raised their graduation rates 30% in 2 years, and it has stayed high. And ever since that tool went in, their graduation classes have been larger than the previous year. So we know that we can have impact, right? We know that that impact can be sustainable. And it didn't require an enormous amount of change inside the organization because these tools can slip in seamlessly. And I think that's the other thing that gets me excited about inclusive AI, is that the tools are sometimes simple, right? The interfaces can be quite simple. We've seen that with some of the work that we're doing around the humanitarian data insights platform, where you can just ask questions and get data back in maps and state lines and all sorts of data that immediately tells you what is there. So I think the opportunities are there. I think the technology is maturing. I think we're doing some great thinking about what inclusivity and ethics and equity looks like. And I'm optimistic that we are moving forward with our eyes wide open around both what the opportunities and the challenges are, but we are moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. This is rapid fire, by the way, and I do have more questions. Let me just be clear, right? So to the rest of you, is rapid fire, lay out the groundwork, right? What does AI or social impact mean for you? Iqbal, let me come to you.
Thank you, Uyi. I think, so we come, I work at MIT's Poverty Action Lab, where I think the underlying premise that we have is show me the data, show me the evidence. And so for us, we've been really excited about AI as a general purpose technology, and the applications are fantastic. I think it really is one technology, putting my old civil service hat, has the ability to transform the way we are fighting climate change and what we are doing in development. But I have a fear that we are also going into this headlong with a too much optimism that everything is going to work, everything is going to succeed. All we need is to put good money and the good technology, and everything else will come together. And I think what we want to go into this with our eyes wide open and say, as we are investing in the technology, as we are investing in the people, are we investing in understanding what is working and why is it working, most importantly, because I don't think we're doing enough of that.
That's excellent. Between Lauren and Iqbal, I hear us saying pragmatic optimism. That's fantastic. Gayan, what about you?
Thank you.
And with apologies, Rob couldn't make it today. Rob is not feeling well, but we have someone who's going to come in and step in. You are actually the head of data.
Data and technology.
That's right.
Chief Digital Officer.
Take it away, Gayan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So I work for UNDP. If you are not familiar with the UN system, UNDP is the development arm of United Nations, and we are present in over 170 countries on the ground. And we believe in a future where digital is inclusive and that leaves no one behind, which brings me to this conversation on data, and especially privacy and rights-based approach to data. And we need to ensure data is inclusive. At the same time, privacy is applied at every step of the data lifecycle as well, not just at the beginning. And also, we are at a critical inflection point when it comes to AI. A recent report released says about 15.7 trillion will be added to the global economy, but only 10% will benefit from that. And as we know, about 80% of the global population lives in the global south. So this is a staggering stat when you think about how 80% of the global population is left behind. So how can we change this? How can we close this gap? We should work, we at UNDP believe in working on data, computing, green computing, talent, and building ecosystems.
Thank you.
We need to ensure we build a future where Global South is not just users of AI, they are part of this.
Spoken very clearly. Katya.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with so many friends, old and new. Thanks a lot to Mastercard for gathering us. So, to me, when I think about inclusive AI, I think about the many really genuinely very impressive use cases that private markets are going to deliver, and hopefully many of them are going to be very broadly beneficial in profoundly transformative ways. But there are also many use cases that realistically the private markets are not going to deliver. And some of those are the ones that are going to be most beneficial to poorest and most vulnerable communities around the world. And so to me, the field of inclusive AI, one of the main goals should be about making sure that these latter use cases also do happen. And think about AI for climate resilience, for turning the corner on the learning crisis, for boosting productivity in the service economy, and many more that hopefully we'll get a chance to further unpack today.
That's excellent. This is a fantastic panel. I think you all have laid the great groundwork for, let's just jump in even deeper now, right? And we want to find use cases, and we want to get the guardrails to make sure that we are watching out for those who are marginalized. So here are some questions to take us to that level. Let me start with you again, Lauren, if that's okay. You've worked at the intersection of technology, development, and policy, and have managed similar transformational societal shifts like the one we are currently witnessing with AI. And here's the question. How has the field of data for social impact evolved? And how does AI fit into that field? Can you give us some examples?
Yes, and thank you. My gray hair will tell you, I've been through several technology shifts, over time, whether it was the push to digitize early at the dawn of the internet age. It was, whether or not we started moving to mobile, and now, of course, all of the work that is happening around data and AI. And I think, look, there's always, everyone knows this. There's always a hype cycle, and then there's the, pit of disillusionment, and then we actually get back to utility. We're somewhere in there. I don't know if it'll follow the same cycle. What I do know, though, is that technologies that have real impact and allow us to move forward, and for organizations to accomplish what they want to accomplish with greater impact, with more efficacy, with greater confidence, those things stick around. There have been lots of technologies that have popped up and then go away. The things that are useful actually stick around, and we figure out how to bring them in and adopt them well. we see that. I think that's what will happen again here. I think that's why use cases are important. I think it's why some of the previous examples I think are promising in the way that we're thinking about the utilization of AI. And I think we will follow a similar trail around thinking about how are we really having impact? How do we bring this to the social impact sector? How do we make sure the social impact sector knows how to use these tools and use them well? And what we will see in another 5 years is, gosh, that felt hard at the time, but now it's just the way we do business.
Excellent. Thank you. Iqbal, I'm going to come to you. You coordinate JPAL's worldwide research, policy outreach, capacity building, and operations within across 7 regional offices. And you are a trusted advisor to policymakers and the government of India. In the rapid global advancement of AI, what are some of the key use cases to illustrate how or where AI has driven equitable change for inclusive growth? Please give us some examples of what is working and one thing that is not working.
Great. So I think this is based not just on our experience working with AI tools and machine learning over the last few years, but also in terms of what in general is much more amenable to technology in development and climate. So I think we see kind of 5 areas where I think AI can actually have a pretty huge transformational impact. The first is in better targeting of programs, whether it is programs by governments or by social enterprises. A lot of that is right now completely based on means testing. If you're below the poverty line, you get it without thinking about who can benefit the most from it. So that's number one. The second is removing the supply constraints to good trained frontline workers. All of us know that frontline workers keep getting added more and more work every year, but there's not enough of them, and I think AI can enhance that. The third is just improving the productivity of those frontline workers. Think about a primary health center worker who can now get AI to help them understand what a really peculiar disease they have never seen means. The fourth thing is biases. I think a lot of the world worries so much about biases in AI, and I always tell people I'm far more worried about biases in me and in my fellow colleagues rather than biases in AI, because the biases in AI can probably be removed through 10 lines of very good coding, whereas the biases in me needs like a lot more work on that. And then the last bit is, I think, something which people haven't thought about, but I think is really important. Fiscal systems around the world are under tremendous stress after years of COVID, after the deglobalization impacts. Foreign aid is drying down. Governments around the world are going to cut something. And if history tells us something, the first thing they are going to cut is not military spending. It's not going to be, it's going to be development spending, and it's going to be the fight against climate change. And I think AI has tools to do that. So then to your point about the use cases, let me take quickly through 3 without detailing too much. The first one on better targeting. So we are working with Google.org in India on how do you get better flood forecasting from rivers. So Google has these incredible tools which allows them to know at very micro level which houses are likely to be flooded. But that's just the beginning of it, right? Like, how do you send that message? Should it be a WhatsApp message? What should be the frequency of the message? And how do you expect humans who have, to trust this WhatsApp message and this technology when you're telling them to evacuate their house in a way that they have never done it? And what happens after a few false positive? So very interesting on how that is coming together. In terms of improving the productivity of frontline workers, we are working in Brazil with teachers. This is an evaluation that actually happened, and said, what if we can free the teachers' time from doing rote, like evaluation and grading of test sheets and others, and instead free up their time. AI can and ML tools can kind of take care of that, and instead now use the teacher's time to give more comprehensive one-on-one feedback to the children on their essays or on their performance. So I think that's a second one that we're very excited about. And so I think there are many such use cases which are going to be very, very promising. In terms of what we are disappointed about is, I think, exactly this technology in a vacuum, where people are thinking about only the technology, but not its application. So to give you an example, on the last thing that I told you about fiscal space, you can now use AI tools to understand who's cheating on taxes. By the current system is basically command and control, right? Like give Iqbal, the IRS guy, the ability to raid Shamina's house, which sounds very benign in the US, although it could change in November. But it can be a really insidious tool in developing countries for corruption. So instead, for instance, use AI tools to say, okay, you have a 100-foot ceiling, you have 3 motorcycles parked in your driveway, and you're only paying 10 rupees in taxes, dude, pay up your fair share. And so using that tool. So we had this evaluation, worked in India, showed great results, but then no political will to actually implement it. Because the command and control structure actually works for a lot of people. It has created this whole set of people who are beneficial. And so that was my point earlier, that if we think about technology in vacuum, even the best technologies that work will not work, not because of the technology, but because of other reasons.
It's a fantastic segue. So the last two panelists have talked about implementation and use cases, and Iqbal set this up very well, as if he was looking at my notes, right? So what do we need to make this happen? Right. So I'm going to turn to our UN panelists now, and I'll start with you, Katya. At the UN Secretary General's Innovation Lab, you lead projects that rely on multi-sector partnerships, bringing together the private sector and international organizations. What challenges and opportunities arise from advancing AI for global development through public-private partnerships? And how can such partnerships drive equity and innovation?
Thank you. And I love this question because it's one of those maybe not so frequent cases where, while I could talk about many challenges, the opportunities are just so much greater, and they make it so worth to invest effort in overcoming these challenges. Like, what are some of the key ones? Of course, you need to invest effort into building trust, into building a shared language across sectors that you partner with, just around how things are done, the rules that are written and unwritten that can take you just a little bit longer to learn and tackle than if you are partnering within your own sector. But with the right motivation, none of this is insurmountable. And the motivation here is really great because partnering across sectors just makes things that were completely impossible before feasible suddenly. And I'll give you an example of our flagship initiative at the Secretary General's Innovation Lab around AI. It's called DISHA, which stands for Data Insights for Social and Humanitarian Action. And it is a coalition effort that brings together humanitarian and development organization. UNDP is our core partner. It brings together technologists, academics, philanthropists, delivery partners to put AI in service of humanitarian and development needs at scale, safely and responsibly. And this effort is just impossible without these cross-sector partnerships. Humanitarian and development agencies, they bring the domain expertise, they shape the product choices that we make. They make sure that whatever we are building is not only relevant to the needs, but is actually firmly grounded in first-hand understanding of the sensitivities of the context where it's going to be used. And then, of course, technologists, academics, they bring cutting-edge AI expertise, and philanthropists just make the whole thing possible in the first place. Last week, as an example, we announced a product that DISHA developed in close collaboration with UN Satellite Center, Google Research, and WFP, and it's a product that allows to identify damaged buildings on satellite images after a disaster event 6 times faster than an expert analyst can do it manually. And this is a really precious time to save, because after a disaster event, humanitarians need this analysis as soon as possible, and every hour can mean difference between lives saved and lost. And these kinds of projects only become possible when, across many organizations, people work as one team. So yeah, I'm a big believer here, and there is just so many more opportunities I can talk about than challenges.
Thank you, Katya. Gayan, I knew I was going to make this mistake today. Gayan, so the UN office that you work at work across 170 countries globally, many of which are in the low middle income countries and contexts and settings. What is your and UNDP's strategy to integrate AI or digital technologies in global development so that it becomes an empowering force for the people and the planet? How can we drive equity and innovation at scale for these people that are at the bottom of the pyramid?
Thank you for that question. In fact, the only way we can drive this at scale is creating that enabling environment. And the way to create that is through partnerships like this, bringing people together. And now we have global instruments such as the Global Digital Compact as well, which provides very specific areas that we need to focus on. But the question is, how can we translate that global instruments into local action at country level? And we at UNDP, we take a multi-layered approach to this. We focus on the foundations, as we call it, the digital public infrastructure as it's known, the ID systems, the data exchanges, the financial systems that needs to be connected. We work across the spectrum all the way starting from assessments with the governments on where they are, how they can improve, to strategy development, to not just infrastructure development, but really what the policy and regulation layer that comes into it, which makes it public in the first place. So UNDP is involved in over 60 countries now in building this. And also we believe in inclusivity and access, especially when it comes to data. So we have a local language accelerator program that we are working with private sector in digitizing some of the local languages, but in a non-extractive way, involving local communities so the local ecosystem can benefit from it. And Katya already talked about partnerships in this space as well. With DISHA, with World Bank, we are in a partnership called Development Data Program, and which brings over 50 private sector partners to provide critical data to make key development interventions for these communities. And also with AI, when it comes to AI, inclusive AI, with the G7 presidency of Italy, we are developing AI for Sustainable Development Hub. And so far, we've consulted over 500 stakeholders, private sector, civil society, and others, to build this hub around data computing and talent and the ecosystem as well. So we are taking a multi-layered approach, and all of this will come together through building capacity locally, so countries are not dependent totally on bringing in talent from outside. So we have different capacity building programs, through a partnership with ITU, targeted towards throughout the society as well, societal level skills to actually targeted towards policymakers on. When it comes to AI, it's so intertwined with issues like data governance, cybersecurity. So for policymakers to understand what are some foundational layers issues you are dealing with here and where the capacity should be built on as well. Not just skills, but the institutional capacities. So that's how UNDP addresses this problem, to become that, to build these enabling environments. And also we want governments to be both the innovators and to create that enabling environment. So that would be the only way this would scale.
Fantastic. So grateful to all of you. We could go on, and I could ask more questions. But I'd like to the audience to walk away with some specifics. I want to give you 30 seconds to each of you to state your call to action. What is your call to action, right? So again, I'll start with you, Lauren. What's your call to action for this group?
Okay, I already screwed up the rapid fire thing, so but I'm going to give you two. The first I would say is, I think to be open to the possibilities around where these tools can improve the way that organizations do work. Don't be afraid of them. I think experimentation and jumping in with both feet is sometimes, the best way to figure out what's going to work and what isn't going to work. The second thing, my second call to action, is along with Joanne Stonier, who's the Mastercard Fellow for AI and Data, we released a white paper last week on data equity. In there is a framework around how you evaluate equity at all different stages of a data project throughout the data lifecycle and in lots of different ways, not just in collection and representation and features, but actually access and outcomes and whatnot. Angela was part of that working group as well, and so that work was developed, and it is a big step forward, and I would just throw that out there as a call to action to please go take a look at that and think about equity as you're developing your work.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Iqbal?
Great. Lauren already summarized this beautifully for me, but I would say that, be very enthusiastic and be very bullish about this technology, because I do think it's different and it can have a huge transformational impact. So I'm all for it, but at the same time, be humble, and I think we need to have humility that there is a generation of our forefathers and our foremothers who also had technologies, and they had interventions that they thought was doing well. It's now going to be 80 years of the Bretton Woods institutions, and every one of them invested in technologies and interventions, whether it's community participation or one laptop per child, thinking that they had the silver bullet, that this was going to solve the problem. And very much like Lauren, like my gray hair is also telling the same story, that many of them will work, but many of them are not going to work. And inclusion for me means making sure that we're not just including a lot of social enterprises from LMICs who are working with a lot of people in the LMICs, but inclusion also means that the impact is reaching the people and doing the right things. And if we are not measuring that impact, if we are not doing that rigorously and not using the tools we have gotten so good at in the last 20 years about measuring the impact, then I think we are being dishonest. And the last thing any of us wants is either our children or grandchildren to look back at us the way we look back sometimes at our parents and say, oh God, they should have known better.
Thank you, Iqbal. We won't be the generation that fails. It's okay. Okay. Rob, Gayan, I'll save you for last, but Katya.
Thank you for not, making me wrap this up. Yeah, so if you believe like I do that AI is one of the consequential technologies of our time, then the choices that we as society make about what kind of uses to put AI towards, they will matter a lot for the economic transition and how it unfolds, the economic transition that AI is bringing about. So my call to action is, let's be mindful of these choices and make sure that they do cater also to the humanitarian development, social needs of communities that the market often underserves around the world, and let's build the infrastructure through which these communities can very meaningfully participate and influence these choices.
Thank you. Gayan.
I will build on what you said. In fact, these investments, we believe about 500 billion will be invested in AI in the next few years, and these investments to be channeled to the global south. That let's make sure there's more than 80% of the population is not left behind. And the benefits of this technology, benefits of AI, reaches everyone, everywhere. So we don't leave anyone behind in this.
Thank you so much. Just to summarize, and you've heard from this panel, Shamina, hopefully that this has laid the groundwork for the day. You asked for what are the use cases, right? What is possible with AI? They've said it all. But one thing I want to leave with this group is talent is abundant because there are smart people everywhere, but opportunities are scarce. And we heard from this panel here that we need to work with the local communities to build capacity so that a third of the world is not left behind from this thing that is transforming the world. We'll hear more about this today, but I'm so grateful to this panel. Could you help me appreciate that?